I'm told that when
Hey, it's showtime, folks. Showtime. Tim's over there rapping. It's Friday on May 8th. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Peoples_Pundit. I'm joined by Tim, the Source Anderson. You guys can follow him on Twitter at TJ Anderson1. Oh, what a day today, folks. So it's justice and job losses in America. That's the
is this going to be a 4-hour show today, Rich?
No, it's Freewheeling Friday, but no 4-hour show. Actually, I was like weighing whether or not we'd kick it down a bit, but we'll see. I mean,
I'm only joking that we could there's probably that much material out there.
I was just I was actually trying because just for people who don't know, Friday is like a picture day for the house, for building the house. And I got to speak to the builder every Friday, and it's like a very exciting day for us. And I'm trying to always like wrap up the show so I can get back because I don't want my wife to miss it, because if she, my wife is not like, a little good. She cooks like a monster, but she's great at it. And she's a great mother, but she loves Lowe's. She wants to talk to the builder. She's just that kind of woman. So I try to get home in time, and pictures are a big deal. Everybody, we work hard for our dreams. You know what I mean? And watching this thing go up is something that you actually like create and go up is really cool. So pictures are a big deal because it shows the progress you're making. You know what I mean? But let's get into this though first, because I got the charts loaded up. And I'm thinking, let's just show, because I got them all on the article too. It was a jobs report this morning, Tim. Let's just go into that. And after we get done with it, then give us a market update, because I think people are going to be like a little bit stunned. There are other things going on that are offsetting some of this. So let's go over it and then we'll talk about it. The U.S. economy lost 20.5 million jobs in April. All right, directly due to the coronavirus mitigation efforts. We all know that. Unemployment rate rose to 14.7. A couple things, both Tim, you had some great notes this morning on it, and we'll talk about it. A couple things to point out with that unemployment rate. All right, jobs lost in March revised down another 169,000 from 701,000 to 870,000. I actually thought it would be more than that.
So did I.
I really thought we were looking at like 1.5 million. I really did. Yeah. Just because of the closures, if not private, the public sector, the amount of governors that were cutting jobs to get to 50%, and they had been furloughed for a little bit. That turned into unemployment. Let's just do the 1-year civilian labor force, civilian unemployment rates, folks. We know it's going to be ugly. There's your trend right there. It's ugly. We can look at, we'll go back and look at all, but the bottom line is it's since the, let me read the story. I'm getting into historical first here. All right. I can skip that part. I already gave it to you. As bad as these numbers are, folks, they both beat their respective consensus, which is there's a low end and there's a high end of the forecast range. The consensus is the consensus. And for both the unemployment rate and the actual number of jobs lost, they were both beats, which it still doesn't take away from the fact that this is the high for the unemployment rate. It's the highest rate and the largest over the month increase in the history of the series. So, you heard a lot of comparisons. I've been making them to the Great Depression. As far as numbers alone,
probably had higher rates of unemployment. Then the unemployment rate is 14%. We probably had rates in the mid-20s during the Depression, but these same numbers were not tabulated.
That's right. It's a different series, and people should know that. Right. So we have that up there, guys. Every chart in this article, go to People's Pundit Daily. It's the headline story right now. Every single chart in here goes back to the beginning of that specific series. Sometimes there's an economic indicator where the prior data that was collected, we'd be able to incorporate it. If that is the case, it will always be denoted. All right. It will always say from 1950 on, it was this series. But before that, the aggregate data is from this. It will always say that. Here, we're looking at simply the series, which we go back to like 45, Tim, in most of these indicators that we do with job, on the unemployment and jobs, or the employment situation report. Everything that's released in there, most of that goes back to like 45, or 48. Sorry, January.
I think it's 48 for this series.
It's 48. Yep.
Right.
So forecasts for job losses range from a low of 30 million to a high of 8,600,000. Again, the consensus for the loss was 21 and a half million. Forecasts for the unemployment rate range from a low, I know it sounds crazy, a low of 12.3% to a high of 18.9%. The consensus was 16.4. So again, both were beats in their respective forecasts, though, as ugly as the numbers are. This is an interesting number, Tim. The number of unemployed persons who reported being on temporary layoff increased tenfold to 18.1 million. The number of permanent job losers rose by about 500,000, 544,000.
That first category is a big deal.
On your note this morning, before we move on to labor force participation, can you explain why that's important? You had that in your notes, messages you sent this morning.
Yeah. So look, and it gets a little quirky, but and just bear with me because I want to bring it up so that I say it correctly. And basically there was a comment from the Labor Department in the report that said, and I might not get this absolutely correct, but it said, those listed as employed but absent from work due to other reasons were classified as employed on temporary layoff.
Right.
If they had been classified as unemployed, the unemployment rate would have been 5% higher.
Yes. So we're looking at
the unemployment rate 20%. Came in at 14 point something percent. It was lower than what the estimates were. I think our back of the envelope calculation based on all of the first time weekly job losses that had built up during the month was like 16 to 18%. But this says that, for instance, if you and again, it's from a survey, and the survey week was the second full week in April. But if you were employed but absent from work for other reasons, now that could have been people that were on getting PPP money, okay, because they would technically be employed, still on the employer's books, but absent from work.
Yes.
So there are plenty of people even right now that are getting PPP money from their employers, but they are absent from work. They are technically employed, although they are not productively employed. Now, there could also be a situation where in April, some businesses might have said to some people, look, just I'm not gonna furlough you or lay you off yet, but just don't come to work next week.
Right.
Okay. Right. So if you were employed but absent from work for other reasons, you were classified as employed on temporary layoff. Excuse me. If those people had all been classified as unemployed, the rate would have been 5% higher. Okay. Now, the other thing about this report that jumped out at me, 20.5 million job losses. If you take three categories, hospitality, so you could read that as hotels, maybe restaurants, maybe some hospitality related travel. I'm not really sure what's it's in the subcategory of that. Leisure and retail.
Right.
Almost 10 million job losses. And the reason I think that that's significant is that those are not going to be the jobs that come back to full employment the easiest.
The bounce back jobs. Let's start calling them like the bounce back jobs.
Look,
right.
You're going to have depressed occupancy rates at a lot of hotels, I think, for the next 2 to 3 months. And you're going to have social distancing in restaurants. So they'll be running at much lower capacity than they are used to. And I think that, look, retail has issues.
And let me also to bring up, I'm going to go from like January 1st to April. And the reason why I'm doing that is it doesn't give the trend a lot here, but talking about labor force participation also jumped out at me here. There's a big dip. I mean, not shocking. I just want to note this because you and I had spoken a lot about this under the Trump era. Under Obama, labor force participation could just not get up to 63%. It couldn't stay there. It couldn't hover there. And, I've written about this a lot with overall unemployment, and then as well with, the argument about whether or not the historically low Black unemployment rate and Hispanic unemployment rates, whether or not they should be a credit to Donald Trump's administration or they were a continuation from the Obama era. And in truth, the drop in the unemployment rates under Obama were methodological gimmicks, meaning the more people that left the labor force, the lower the unemployment rate went. A truly tight and strong labor market is when the labor force participation rate continues to rise or holds at critical thresholds. In our case, it's about 63%.
I think it got up to what, 63.4?
Yeah, the high at 1.6.
And it doesn't sound like a big change, but 1 or 2 percentage points is equals a lot of people.
And a lot of that has to do, folks, with the age of the workforce in the country in general, the demographics of the country. Obama's argument always was that there were a lot of people leaving the workforce because of retirement. And while that was partially—
they were leaving the workforce because there weren't any jobs.
That's right. It was partial. It was a partial explanation, but we were nowhere near the years going back to the 50s and the 60s. As time went on, you can see this trend here. That's why I went back to the overall. It started to go higher. And this really does show it here, Tim, how during the Great Recession, it went down considerably. And you can see the low here. Here's the trough, right? And then it stayed there all through Obama's presidency. It stayed there, and it could pick up a little bit. It hit 63% for the first time the summer after Donald Trump took office, and it never looked back. It would bob in and out, but it kept going up. And like Tim said, it hit 63.2. Throughout that time, unemployment rates were falling. And that is a truly strong labor market. And that is what, I bet a bunch of people out there who watch the show probably have read that article that I did specifically on Black unemployment. It was the exact opposite trend under Barack Obama. Unemployment rates for African Americans were falling because they were leaving the workforce. Under Donald Trump, they were re-entering the workforce, and yet the unemployment rate was still falling. And it was this is unfortunately, because we're getting into civilian labor force participation now. Unfortunately, it's one of the saddest things about this report for me. It fell 2.5 percentage points over the month to 60.2. That's the lowest rate since January 1973, when it was just 60%. And the labor force participation rate has risen and held above that critical 63% threshold under the Trump administration after struggling in the prior. If you look at some of these drops, all right, whites 63.1 to 60.3. African Americans 62.6, which by the way, it's gone higher, to 58.6. So they've been hurt disproportionately by this this period. Hispanic and Latinos, Tim, they were rocking as a percentage of the labor force. 67.7% down to 63.3, still above the national average, but Asians are as well at 60.7, but Asians are always among the highest participating groups in the workforce. 64% it was last month. If you go back even a month before that, folks, you can see even better numbers, because we had the initial hit was last month, right, Tim? So, I mean, it started to show signs of stress last month. Let's go down a little bit more here. The equally important, but like less, almost never cited, Tim, is the employment population ratio. That fell 8.7 percentage points to 51.3. That's the lowest rate, the largest month-over-month decline ever in the history of the series. Revisions last month, Tim and I were expecting a lot worse. So February was revised down, a very strong month for job creation, February. A lot of that is what part of this sucks, folks, is that we were just doing so well with the media and everybody trying to push a recession. It was not happening.
Right.
And it was still a strong month, even though it was revised down by 45,000. But the change in March was only revised by 169,000. I'm just shocked about that, Tim. What do you think happened there? Were we just not? Was it not as bad as we thought? Or I mean, so we lost 870,000 with the revisions. I really thought this was going to be like 1.3, 1.5. I was way off.
I just think that a lot of people were still on employers' books in March. And that I just, we really only went into shutdown mode the middle of March. A lot of people could have still been on the books until until April. These still could be just revisions from the second week in March, which would have been before the initial shelter in place guidelines.
Yeah, so we do have another month where we could get another change, but
there'll be a revision, a second revision to that number next month, and then there'll be a revision to April also.
Right.
So
because of the comment you put out, go ahead, finish your thought, because I didn't want to move on to the U6.
The other, it's kind of like the next the next topic within this employment report is average hourly earnings.
Yeah.
The average hourly earnings increased significantly. One of the biggest jumps ever
in history. Yeah. And that's a separate, we do that as a separate
that's not necessarily a good sign, because what that tells us is that the large majority of job losses were at the lower ends of the pay scale.
Right.
Now, clearly, anyone in the restaurant,
that is what that tells us.
Anyone in the restaurant business is going to be at a very low average hourly rate on the books, because a very, very large percentage of their compensation is from tips. But in a lot of the other service businesses, a lot of hotel worker jobs, a lot of retail jobs, a lot of just personal service jobs from hair salons, nail salons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are lower income jobs. And so that will be very interesting to almost try to reverse engineer when these numbers start to improve. What happens to average hourly earnings? It will tell us what type of jobs are coming back
before others
of the pay scale. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you know what? Let's get in, because of what you had written in the notes that and the comments that you had sent me. I said, you know what? Let's also make sure people know the U6. Normally, while we do track it, and it's up there, it's an indicator you guys can see if you want to. We don't always discuss it in the article about the jobs report. It's just, it would be kind of, especially under Trump, we did when it hit an all-time low. This is the thing with Donald Trump and what some of this stuff, the Trump administration, Trumponomics, Maganomics, whatever you want to call it, was working. It was working before this. There is no indicator, Tim, no major indicator where people can't show me where it either hit a positive all-time low or a positive all-time high. most job openings ever in the US, most lowest insured unemployment rate ever, least number of insured unemployed. There's no indicator where you can't show it. The only one that was really left was the largest number of jobs created in a single month. That was like one of the few remaining top line headline covered by everybody indicators, right?
Yeah.
That we hadn't done. If we start to bounce back at the end of summer in big numbers, like Tim and I have discussed before, he could beat Reagan. I think he could beat him easily. A 700,000 a month. I could absolutely see a huge number.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I can.
We'll have a few 7-digit reports. There's,
And now we have same with the U6. So for those who don't know, the U6 is an alternative measure of labor underutilization, seasonally adjusted, I'm giving you here, and it gauges total unemployed plus all marginally attached workers plus total employed part-time for economic reasons as a percent of all civilian labor force plus all marginally attached workers. So it's a larger group of people. It's what Republicans wanted cited under the Obama administration because of those methodological gimmicks that I had told you about before. Under Obama, he was getting credit for this falling unemployment rate. That was just a total hoax. It's just the reality. Anyway, again, yet another indicator under Donald Trump fell to an all-time low, and now we have some really ugly numbers. All right. So it rose 8.7 in March, was a jump in and of itself, but not like a huge one. And now it's 22.8%. So going back to what Tim said, with some of those workers that are just not included in that unemployment rate, it would be, and I forgot what your note said, Tim, but it could conceivably be like 10 almost 10% high, 5%. But
the Department of Labor said it would be 5% higher, but
so it makes that 22.8 number more believable. Just in and of itself, when you're just talking about those workers, and the U6 is everybody. So again, here's the 1 year we just hit that all-time low, and now we're going up. I think the all-time low, folks, for everybody who doesn't know, I want to say it's 6.7. I think it was, where are you? December 2019. I want to say that's the all-time low. You could search for it on PPD. We covered it. But that's the series. There's a perfect example. U6 was not tracked back to 1948. It started in February 1994. That's a perfect example of what we were talking about before. So I'm going to go on ahead and get out of here. But interestingly, Tim, what are you seeing? And this is a good time for you to do the market update. There's a lot going on out there. And Trump was on Fox and Friends this morning. I was listening to it. I was getting ready to head over here. And they brought up the jobs report. Our report was already done. I guess they were talking to him and letting him ramble. Yeah. So they had just gotten to it. Our story was already up, with like 4 charts. But he goes, oh, well, it's to be expected. This is what people expect. And he's trying to give that sense of, we knew it. Obviously, nobody panic, get horrible numbers, but we're going to bounce back, Right. So, hey, Lisa, it's been a long time no see. Lisa Bound. I just wanted to shout out to Lisa. She's a great viewer and hasn't been able to join us in the last couple of days. I saw she just popped in. We're going to talk about Richard Grinnell. That's for another topic, folks. Now that I glanced my eyes over there, we are going to talk. The first part about this show is job losses. Even though the title is Justice and Job Losses, justice is coming later. Right now, let's keep it to the economy. Trump is like, there's things going on out there. And he brought up trade and spoke about that with them. So why don't you tell us what's going on with the market and then explain to people why there's not like some frantic collapse here. There are other things happening.
Well, everyone knew the unemployment number was going to be terrible and the jobs report was just going to be a massive losses. Now the market had given up part of its gains yesterday, late and maybe in the last 2 hours of the day, but still did have relatively impressive gains on the day, particularly after the following 2 days, having had very sharp sell-offs in the last 45 minutes of the day, both on Tuesday and Wednesday. So there was some talk yesterday that China may be backing away from executing on phase one of the U.S.-China trade deal, where they're contractually obligated, according to the deal, to buy just a tremendous amount of agricultural products, both grain and meat, I'm sure. I don't know how it all breaks out. But then this morning, there was definitive joint statement from both a Chinese, very, very high-ranking China trade rep, and from either Lighthizer and or Mnuchin, that they had a long conversation with the China trade people yesterday, and that they have every intention of following through with the purchases that they had agreed to, that basically make up phase one of the U.S.-China trade deal. Now, so the markets were very strong. They were, up a little bit less than 1%, even before the jobs report came out. And I think that was largely attributable to those positive comments on trade. Now we're pretty close to the highs of the day. The Dow is up 1 1/3%. It's up 300 points. It's above 24,000. It had hit that resistance level that we talked about all week long yesterday and backed off from that level. The NASDAQ is up above the 9,000 level. The NASDAQ now is, I'm going to say, up close to 2% year to date.
Right. Right.
But the NASDAQ did not have the same crazy outperformance versus the S&P and the Dow yesterday that it had on a Wednesday, that I thought was a little bit possibly worrisome had it followed through. It hasn't followed through. Although the NASDAQ is definitely outperforming year to date and has had a stronger rally off the late March lows. So the S&P is up 1.2%. The Dow's up a little bit more than that. NASDAQ is up. The S&P is through the 2,900 level. It's at 2,915. So it's less than 100 points from S&P 3000. Clearly, with the oil stocks continuing to be under pressure, that shows that there are a lot of other sectors of the S&P that are doing quite well. NASDAQ is up 1.1%, 9,080. It's very intriguing to see if NASDAQ closes the week above 9,000. It will be headlines over the weekend, I'm sure, in Barron's tomorrow, if it closes that way.
Right. I mean, the Chinese, the position they're in right now, yeah,
they had no choice. They had
come on.
to look. If they thought that they could stick us in the eye by not following through on those agricultural purchases, but they've got no choice. Not only are their crops in their own country damaged from the widely circulated reports before the virus started that millions and millions of their pig supply had been infected with something, not COVID-19, but they had some other infection, and they had to slaughter millions and millions of their pork crop, and they are a big pork consuming nation. But other parts of their crops were also having problems, and I think that Trump has his foot right on their throat with the bad publicity that they're already getting from many parts of the globe because of the way that they potentially bought up a lot of the PPE after they knew what was going on with the coronavirus. And then they went into world markets to buy up PPE, almost as if they were trying to preclude other countries from having it when the virus would get there. So they cannot handle the negative publicity of reneging on this phase one trade deal.
Just no way. And that's I mean, where I'm going with this, it's just not feasible to think that they would be able to do that. Maybe at some point, it'll have to be, we'll have to see how the world reacts. But at some point, They may try to get a little funny, a little screwy, but right now they are just in such a you're just such an ugly situation. The publicity is terrible, like Tim said, and then you have what is not really making the rounds in American media here, but what we're seeing is this huge report from the Five Eyes, and it's not good for him, Tim. Hold on, let me kill this alarm. This huge report for the Five Eyes that basically said they misled the world, and they misled the world. They got the WHO to help them, so they're just in this bad spot. It's not getting coverage here, but at some point we're going to circle back to this, and it will. So I just don't see how they could do that, Tim. Not now anyway. So they really have no choice.
And I wouldn't even doubt that they have been told by the Trump administration, possibly by Trump himself, don't even think about backing away from this trade agreement.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because we will use it viciously against you.
Yeah, and he would have an alliance to do it.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Brits are ready to rumble on this. Boris Johnson has
the Brits are pissed.
They're pissed
mildly at the Chinese, probably to the point where they're going to reverse course and not have Huawei equipment in their 5G network.
Oh, at this point, I expect that, Tim, especially because if we reach that first expiration date on Boris Johnson's order and things were looking better at that point, then I could see them salvaging that with Huawei. But they had to go everybody's economy. So, if it makes you feel, and I'm sure it doesn't, because it doesn't make me feel better, but it's important to understand that the entire West is going to have problems like we have problems. And then when the U.S. falls, it drags the rest of the world down with it. That's just the way it is. So they're going to be mad. They are mad now. And I think, Tim, we're not quite there yet, but the polling is overwhelming. The British people are pissed. The American people are pissed. It doesn't really matter, that what the media and the Democrats that are trying to do this apology tour for China, they're up against. Maybe they have
it's going to be woven into the campaign to a very significant degree.
That is Donald Trump's major opening. Speaking of which, let's get into the polling, right? So it's 10:30. Now we can share the poll. I'm going to actually just put up that intensity index, okay? So because, again, this is what I was saying. If it holds, if it doesn't, what's going to happen? So the daily presidential tracking poll by Rasmussen Reports is sponsored this week by Inside the Numbers and PPD, Monday through Sunday. So Saturday and Sunday, we're going to get these numbers. Maybe we'll do a blurb on it, but really we'll circle back on Monday and we'll take the totality of the week and we'll talk about it. All right. Trump's unchanged, 49% approve, 49% disapprove. He's unchanged on the headline, so there's not much reason to talk much about that. But I have been going on about this intensity index. Today it widened out a little bit. There was that great day 2 days ago where he jumped. But now we're starting to see, here's the intensity index, folks. We're back to -7. All right. 34% strongly approve and 41% strongly disapprove. It's that and the reason why this matters, it's that somewhat disapprove part of the response rate, in the overall. So we're only at 8 now, 8% somewhat disapprove. That's very common with what we see when we poll Donald Trump. The larger chunk is strongly approve and strongly disapprove, and the somewhats are significantly smaller. And why I think the Rasmussen Intensity Index is cool is because that gives you a great idea on who may be softening and being willing to change their minds, because there's no room for, there's not a whole lot undecided. There's almost no undecided with Donald Trump. Some of these polls that come out, and it's like 10, 11, 13% undecided. I haven't gotten that in a long time, Tim. A long time. It's not statewide, not nationally. You have to move those people. who say they somewhat approve or somewhat disapprove, depending on who you are, of course, right? Let's look at how this thing changed over the week. All right. Here was the first day on Monday. We were at -9. On Tuesday, we fell to -7. On Wednesday, -4. And you could see that trend clear as day right there. That basically held yesterday. And then now we see a little bit of a widening out again. All right. Just so people can get that. Watch that number as we go into the weekend. What does it have to do with what happened? Mean reversion, maybe. We'll see. That's why we're going to keep an eye on it. All right. Maybe if Tim, so many things surprised me under this guy. It could pop back down tomorrow. I mean, he just doesn't follow traditional. I don't know. Things just don't work out the same way. If this was Obama or Bush or anybody, I would say that jobs report is ugly and tomorrow it'll be -20. You know what I mean? I'm serious, but it's just different with him. It's just something different. It doesn't hold. It doesn't follow the same. It just doesn't follow the same pattern.
The pattern. No, it doesn't follow the same pattern.
No,
it's and there's people, and I think that people have different trigger points with Trump for whether they say strongly approve, strongly disapprove, or somewhat disapprove than they do with most other key national figures, presidents or presidential candidates.
Totally agree. And I want to make a lot about this, about justice. So I'm not sure I want to spend a lot of time on the polling today. We can talk about it. I mean, it's Freewheeling Friday. So if you guys, I'll tell you right now, there's people watching that haven't watched before. I'll tell you that, looking at the number. You guys can ask questions, whether you
and I know you've mentioned it numerous times too, but it's certainly worth highlighting that people, at least I am not concerned about the negative intensity reading, because there's such a big difference, even more of a difference with Trump, between the questions, do you approve and will you vote for?
Right. Well, there again,
you've talked about it. You've talked about it many times.
Yeah, let me repeat that a little bit. Actually, I mean, there's just for people who don't know, there is this number, this percentage of people who say I don't approve of Donald Trump. I not strongly, but within it, some of them it overlaps a little, but somewhat disapprovers, which is why that's so important. They don't like him, but they like his policy. And ultimately, they'll vote for him. And which is why when we ask that question, we'll always ask, especially if it's an election poll, we'll always ask about, do you approve of the job, he's doing on the economy and jobs, foreign policy, immigration, trade, whatever like the issues du jour are. And it's always higher. It's always higher. Right. Whereas most other presidents, well, not even most, but Barack Obama was the exact opposite. When you polled Barack Obama, they would tell us that they did approve of Barack Obama. That was because they personally liked him. But then when you asked about issues, do you approve of the job he's doing in the economy? He was always underwater. Do you approve of the job he's doing on foreign policy? We had really bad numbers during the ISIS explosion, which brings us to Michael Flynn, by the way, because this is where Barack Obama's hatred of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn really starts, right? For those of you who don't know, Barack Obama wanted to pull out of Iraq. Look, I'll personally tell you, I'm not a neocon. I did not agree with the Iraq war to begin with, though at the time I was just a soldier and you do what you're ordered to do. But terrorists were not in Iraq, or at least, well, you know what I mean. That was not where the group of people who took down the towers came from or crashed into the Pentagon. Those were Saudi-funded, Saudi-backed people. They, were being harbored by the Taliban in Afghanistan. But Michael Flynn would not lie about the problem that Obama really caused when he left Iraq too early and left that vacuum. All right. When Barack Obama pulled most of the troops out, almost all of them, you're a soldier like Lieutenant Flynn, and you remember the blood and treasure that was spent taking these areas. And he was not going to lie on the intelligence assessments, which basically said that there was really no threat, that ISIS was not as big of a threat. And it was even before that. Back then, they called ISIS AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and AQAI, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, however they put it, right? Acronyms, military. And Flynn would not get on board with the bogus intelligence assessment, and he was the head of the DNI. He would not get on board with, he was the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence,
for the armed forces.
That's right. I mean, it's like the military's NSA, and the intelligence agencies answer to him, So Obama was trying to get an intelligence community consensus on the true threat since the U.S. had withdrawn from Iraq. And Flynn was not going to do it, man. He was not going to play ball. So like my old boss, General McChrystal, he got rid of him. Anybody, for all the talk about Donald Trump, anybody who did not, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Toe the line.
Toe the line.
Did not toe the line.
Wasn't a sycophant, even, I would say.
And Flynn was a career intelligence guy. It's not like he was a guy that was floating around different parts of the military that was had just been put in in an intelligence role, at some point in time. That he was a career spook. Yep.
He was the real deal.
Yeah.
Which brings us to yesterday. All right. So just remember, when Obama met with Donald Trump, then the incoming president, Barack Obama told Donald Trump he needed to worry the most about two things. One, North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile program and their nuclear weapons program, which is really two different programs. The delivery system is the ICBM. You still need to know how to put the warhead on the top of that puppy and send it out, right? And then he said that, and then he put Mike Flynn in the same category as Pyongyang. Think about that for a second, folks. Think about that for a second. A man who gave 30 years of his life in dedication and service to this nation, he put on par with North Korea. And there was a reason for that. Michael Flynn, for the old expression, knew where the bodies were buried kind of thing in the Obama administration.
Right.
Also, there was a lot, without getting into the weeds on it, a lot with the Iran deal. The Obama administration, now Ben Rhodes admitted to it, in that New Yorker article. It was a fraud that they perpetrated on the American people.
Totally.
Mike Flynn
knew all of the details.
Yes. And they couldn't have that. They just couldn't have it. So in order to get rid, though, but he was smart and he had experience. He knows how this industry, this community operates. So if you're going to put in an insurance policy, okay, you're going to first try to prevent a presidential candidate from being elected, and then later get an insurance policy because it was clear from the jump Donald Trump wasn't going to play ball like other presidents. He didn't care about the J. Edgar Comey kind of way of doing things. All right. He just didn't. So he wasn't going to play ball. And then he had to go. There's just too much going on over there to have this guy who's not answered to anybody who won't play ball. There's just too much going on. So, but we'll get into this one thing. People keep saying Flynn pled guilty. Flynn pled guilty. When you have a federal prosecutor with unlimited resources crawling up every orifice and bleeding you dry financially, 3 decades, all you have to show for it after 3 decades of service is a townhouse outside of the DC suburbs. And then you have to sell that to pay for not even a fifth of your legal bills when you did nothing wrong. And I'm going to show you folks right now. He did nothing wrong. Andrew McCabe, with the transcripts that were released yesterday, the only thing he really did wrong was lie to Pence about it, but he didn't really lie to the FBI. And you're going to see that right now. And in these transcripts, which Schiff did not want released, Adam Schiff did not want released.
Right.
I'm going to show you in a little bit that they absolutely knew that. They had to get rid of Michael Flynn because they could not carry out what Tim called the other day, and I won't argue with it. It was what Tim called a coup. And when they had to get rid of him. And in Flynn's position, people say, well, he pled guilty. That means he admitted something's wrong. You've never had a rogue prosecutor up your butt then if you think so simple like that. You're a simple-minded little tool. You're a fool. They have unlimited resources. They're threatening your family and your friends with jail. You have no other choice. So you plea out because you don't have the money to fight it. So you plea out just to get out from underneath it. Same thing, by the way, with Michael Cohen, who I don't want to defend. But Michael Cohen, Robert Mueller, which we covered, we had an exclusive on this. If you guys haven't read this story, you should go read it on People's Pundit Daily. Michael Cohen was threatened by Robert Mueller. He said he would take his wife and throw him in jail over fraud with the taxi cab company, Tim.
Right.
Financial fraud, loan fraud. That was another exclusive. Nobody reported the strong.
Was it Mueller or was it the Southern District of
Mueller
New York? Because pretty early on, Mueller kicked that to
but the threat started with Robert Mueller's office.
Right.
Right. And then they kicked it to the Southern District of New York and told him, you're going to cooperate with us or else you're going to be, we're going to haul your wife off. She's going to do 30 years in jail. They told her 30 years. So that is why. And Michael Cohen wanted a job in the White House badly. He felt like Donald Trump kind of like left him behind. But he did an about face after being a Trump sycophant. He did an about face because he was trying to save his wife from going to jail. All right. Let's pull up the story first. Then we're going to pull up the transcripts just to back up more of the story, because the transcripts from the investigation the House Intelligence Committee conducted under the Republicans, Adam Schiff, after taking over, had fought tooth and nail to keep these transcripts from coming to light. And you're going to find out why. Because he's a liar. It's that simple. All right. So the Justice Department dropping case against Michael Flynn. All right. The U.S. Justice Department dropped its case against former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. The development comes after, quote, newly discovered and disclosed information in the form of newly unsealed documents and internal memos. Before I even go on, the evidence, well, let me read this last one. And then before I even go on, I want to show you some of the reactions to this yesterday. Heads were popping, man. They were exploding yesterday. The evidence raised questions about the nature of the investigation, which began at the Federal Bureau of Investigation and inevitably led to the appointment of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Let's take a look at some of these. Well, Trump from this morning, but we're not going to do that first. Here's Jerry Nadler. This is outrageous. Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to investigators. Again, the same stupid argument, simple-minded tool argument. The evidence against him is overwhelming, Tim. Really?
Yes.
Really?
Right.
Not at all. I guess it's like at this point, Tim, they just really hope people are stupid. They hope people are stupid. Like the only ones they have left are ones that are A, stupid, B, too lazy to read the evidence themselves, and C, played along with this hoax from the jump.
Right.
So now they're afraid, okay, they can't come out. Like, the Hennessy's at Lawfare. You were great yesterday, by the way. That was great. She's such a hack. All right. They can't come out and admit this thing was a fraud now. No. All right. So the evidence against him is not overwhelming at all. In fact, the black and white evidence shows this was a complete setup. It's a hoax. Andy McCabe, I will show you his transcripts. There's so many out there. It's going to take time for, the media to go through it. But there's two in Andy McCabe's transcripts that I want to show you that really say it all. They really say it all. Okay. But here we go. The decision to overrule the special counsel is without precedent and warrants an immediate explanation. You know what's without precedent, Mr. Nadler? Putting a special counsel on a president using a hoax of an investigation to try to undo the results of an election. That is unprecedented. All right. Let's get, before I get into Adam Schiff, let's pop this back on. We'll read through this. Okay. and then we'll go back to some of the because the transcripts are just unbelievable, and people, they're like too lazy, Tim, and all they do is try to they get their information is spoon fed to them, and they're just too damn lazy to read it themselves. It's not debatable anymore. You just look and sound stupid. I would strongly suggest just admitting you were wrong, because you're just going to look dumber and dumber as this goes along. There's more coming down the pipe. More. So just admit to it now. Mea culpa now. I don't, it's just no character here. Anyway, the charge of politicization, Tim, this like wholesale smearing of people, professional people, we really shouldn't tolerate at all. Like, it just, I tweeted this yesterday. It's absolutely true. It just speaks badly about our national character. You know what I mean? Bill Barr, which Adam Schiff attacks, and so did the rest of them yesterday. Bill Barr had somebody else in charge of this. It wasn't his decision, though. Of course, he has, he's the Attorney General. But U.S. Attorney Jeff Jensen, he recommended dropping the case after he did a review. Yes. And he said those quotes that are up here that I said, newly discovered and disclosed information. Read Jeff Jensen's report, and you will be stunned. There is no way a reasonable person, after reading it, it's very well outlined, very well sourced, very well detailed. There is no way a rational person or reasonable person, whatever you want, could go through that and then come out with some statement about Bill Barr or him politicizing things. A federal judge will have to sign off on this, but events are moving very quickly. All right. Through the course of my review of General Flynn's case, Jensen said, I concluded the proper and just course was to dismiss the case. I briefed Attorney General Barr on my findings and advised him on these conclusions, and he agreed. So, of course, he has to agree, but this was Jensen's decision. Right. Jensen has more than a decade experience at being a career prosecutor. He is not some political hack. He had 10 years in another role before that. This is not a guy that is like, let's see, if it was like Matt Whitaker who did this, I'm not saying Matt's politicized at all. I'm not saying that. I'm saying he has a history.
Well, he is, but I mean,
right. He has a history of.
You're not saying he's unqualified.
That's right. And I'm also not saying that he would use his political persuasions to make a decision. I think I still believe Matt Whitaker is still a man who you can trust to make the correct decision based on the facts and the fact pattern of the case. All right. This guy, though, doesn't even have any of those ties to any kind of political. He just doesn't. He's a career guy. Right. He's a career guy. Right. By the way, the appointment of Shea by Bill Barr, who has been, Shea has been Barr's right-hand man for a long time. The appointment of him in D.C. really should have been a kickoff that some of these things were going to start to come down. All right. Because he's somebody Bill Barr really trusts. And everybody in Washington, D.C., because he has a law enforcement background in Boston, everybody from D.C., whether you're law enforcement or you're in the prosecutor wing of law enforcement, or you're in the, the police who go out and arrest, whether you're in the arresting or the charging, everybody respects Shea. Everybody respects. So he's like a brilliant appointment. Plus, Bill Barr has a very high view of him. He's been his like I said, his right-hand man for a long time. And let's go through this real quick, and because I really want to get to these transcripts on Andy McCabe. So the two tranches of documents totaling 15 pages, this was the initial two dumps, Tim, were unsealed by Emmett Sullivan, he himself, a total disgrace. The first 4 unsealed pages contain clear evidence the investigation and prosecution, which was codenamed Crossfire Razor, was a setup for a perjury trap. By the way, after all of this now, Tim, of course, the judge didn't see some of this exculpatory evidence because Van Breck held on to this and, basically did not give up stuff to the defense in the court that he should have. But really makes Emmett Sullivan, who most people that I've spoken with liked before this, it really makes him look incredibly stupid, because he even basically called Flynn a traitor during that one sentencing or the plea hearing. He basically called him a traitor. He had no evidence, Tim.
Right. But now he still has to take action.
Well, he's got to sign
way
off
because there is still a guilty plea that has been entered in his court.
Yes, he's going to have to. He's going to have to remedy that.
It's not like Flynn is 100% free and clear yet.
No, but it would be, it would be, it would be very difficult for him.
There's a few different, I'm not 100% up on it. There's a few different actions that he could take.
Yeah. And I just think that at this point, it would be really difficult. Now, mark my words, if Donald Trump loses in November, all of this corrupt crew is coming right back. And then they will vindictively go after and use. They've already look. If you can't admit to yourself what happened here, maybe I can't help you. But it's clear these people were more than willing to pull the levers of government, abuse their power to go after political rivals, to go after political oppositions. Right. They are corrupt. To the bone, to the core. The Obama administration was one of, if not the most corrupt in history. This is bad. Nobody has ever undertaken something like this.
Well, they would have, if they come back and try, and
they will if Biden wins, Tim. They will.
Yes, but they would have to clear a double jeopardy hurdle with Flynn if Sullivan vacates the Flynn guilty plea, and then the case is done.
Yeah, I heard.
Okay, so they could charge him with something else, maybe.
Saul made an argument. Saul Weisenberg, he made an argument that there is something they could technically do. It would be outrageous.
Right.
It would be outrageous, but after he's seen what he has seen, there is really
he wouldn't rule anything else.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
But you couldn't go back and charge Flynn if Sullivan vacates his Flynn's guilty plea,
right,
and then the case is dropped by the Department of Justice, there would be a very serious double jeopardy hurdle to clear for a different administration and a different Justice Department to go back and charge him again.
Yeah, I agree.
This is going to be signed and see a certain way by Barr that it would make doing that very difficult.
Well, what Saul was arguing is that, if really wanted to make sure that there was nothing they could do, then Trump should just issue a blanket pardon, which he still could do. Look, if let's say Trump,
Sullivan could sit on this for a couple of months.
Let's.
There's no time. There's no time limit apparently on when Sullivan has to follow up with the issue that there is a signed guilty plea in his court.
Well, they could file, though. I've heard that argument. And the truth, though, is everybody has a right to a speedy resolution of their case. So they could file something and get it done, but
of course, but it could be dragged out for a few more months.
Even if, let's say, Donald Trump was to lose, let's play hypothetical here. Let's say he loses the election. He could just start writing out pardons, to make sure, because these people are in so much danger, and they really are. I mean, Tim, this all comes, well, let me get through this and then we'll talk more about Robert Mueller. But this all really, what in hell was Robert Mueller doing? And we know the answer to that. Robert Mueller is he
wasn't doing anything. Andrew Weissman was doing it.
He's a cover. He's got a long history of being a credible cover-up artist. He is, well documented from the NFL to Boston to under the Bush administration. That is what this man does, but let's speed through this real quick. I think it's worth reading again because when we get into the transcripts, people will know what I'm talking about. The documents inappropriately withheld from the defense contain handwritten notes. While not initially revealed, we now know that the note taker was Bill Priestep, and who was then the assistant director of the counterintelligence division at FBI. Those notes state agents investigating Flynn aimed to, quote, get him to lie so we could prosecute him or get him fired. On January 24th, 2017, federal agents interviewed Lieutenant General Flynn under false pretenses and without counsel about a conversation he had with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Now, I want you guys to keep this conversation in mind. At the time of the conversation, Lieutenant General Flynn was the top foreign policy advisor to then President-elect Donald Trump, not a private citizen. The note taker would write that the one objective of the interview was to, quote, get Flynn to admit breaking the Logan Act. This, we've talked about it before, 1799 law. It was for an early young republic, imposters basically, trying to talk to foreign dignitaries about U.S. foreign policy. It has no relevance here. It has never been used successfully against anybody. It intends to prohibit private citizens from speaking with foreign governments, but it's well outdated and widely viewed as unconstitutional. This is what Jonathan Turley, a liberal attorney, said. I've been a criminal defense attorney for decades. I have seen abusive tactics. However, this is one of the most thuggish records I have seen. Most concerning is that they were trying to create a crime, not investigating a crime. The use of Logan only highlights that bias. And I know in other shows we've been over this, but because of the transcripts, I want to make sure it's fresh in everybody's mind. The agents who conducted the interview initially stated they believed that Flynn had told the truth. So this goes to Flynn lied. After all the evidence is out, the only correct allegation of lying has to do with Mike Pence, which isn't a crime. So from there on in, the administration can make a determination about whether or not he deserves to still have a job there after not being honest with Pence. But this idea that he lied to federal agents, it's over. It's over. All right. The agents initially stated that he told the truth, yet Special Counsel Robert Mueller charged Lieutenant General Flynn with, quote, willfully and knowingly making false statements to federal investigators in late 2017. That is the Martha Stewart statute. Anyway, I could get into some of these things about the defense briefing, but the bottom line is some of these new documents that were released last week are the first time where we see Strzok and Page discuss some of the things that we had already known. They actually talk about altering the 302. They insinuate about altering the 302, which is this is crazy, so corrupt, But they actually discuss it, which we now know happened. And also, too, it's the first time we see them talking about the use of a defensive briefing to spy on the administration. So what an incoming administration gets from the intelligence community about what to expect when you get there, what are the threats to America, et cetera, et cetera. They use that briefing to spy on the incoming administration, particularly at this point, Michael Flynn, because they needed to get rid of him for their insurance policy to work. All right. Robert Mueller's team. And guys, if you're following along with me here later on or whatever now, click on this link and we go through in detail who was on Robert Mueller's team and who these people were, including people who have long histories of political activism, prosecutorial misconduct, unanimous slapdowns, like Tim just talked about, Andrew Weissman, unanimous slapdowns for prosecutorial misconduct by the Supreme Court that don't happen often. This was a team of dirtbags and partisans. All right. They leaned on Flynn to take the deal. That included threatening his son with prosecution. Brandon Van Grack, he is the one who did a lot of that leaning and threatened his son. He is the one who withheld evidence from the defense. All right. He was removed from the case. That's how we got, it was like the first indication, Tim, that something was coming, because he was removed from the case.
Not only that case, but he's been removed from every other case he's has been currently working on. He's probably soon to be an ex-Department of Justice employee.
And then a lot of people that he legitimately prosecuted. And for those of you who are just partisan hacks out there and you don't want to admit what happened here, here's one of the dangers of you turning your blind eye, away from what happened. Every scumbag that Brandon legitimately put behind bars, is now going to file a motion that they want a new, that they want a new review of their case. That's what happens when someone is determined to be corrupt. Legit scumbags get a new crack at the apple, a new bite of the apple. And that's what you turning your blind eye has done. That's the tip of it. It's just something that media never speaks about. It's unfortunate because that could happen, Tim. And then so in December of 2017, Flynn was forced to put his home in Old Town Alexandria, Virginia, up for sale. It's right outside of D.C. According to Zillow, Tim, this townhouse sold for under $820,000 in September of the following year, way below his asking price and far insufficient to pay his legal bills. Covington and Burling, that's the law firm that represented Flynn before he got Sidney Powell.
Right.
They were paid about $3.5 million. There was
a shame. What a shame.
And it's nowhere near his house. So his house, he lost his house. And that doesn't even come close to the money he already paid for his legal defense. There was a review last year we found. It showed that he still owed 4.6. I don't know. We did try to confirm that. That's personal stuff, so not surprised. I will say though, Sidney Powell did confirm the sale of the house. So it's just so
they don't deserve to be paid another penny.
No, they don't, Tim. And after 3 decades of his life,
some people even think it was a setup in the way that law firm was referred to him.
Some people believe that. Yep. 3 decades of his life, Tim, and all he had to show for it was this damn townhouse, and it's gone. You know what? He's still a relatively
young guy. He's in good shape. I'm sure he'll get a couple of book deals.
You know what? He deserves it. And think about all the money.
He'll have a shot for a comeback.
Think about all the money that the scumbags of the world, the Andy McCabe's, the Lisa Strucks, the Lisa Pages, the Peter Strucks, every dirtbag who was in on this Russia collusion farce, this fraud, this conspiracy to defraud the American people, all of the money that they raised on their GoFundMe pages. Think about that, and here we have Flynn. He did have a legal defense fund, but he was not pulling in the money like the money that was being thrown at every liberal moron that, got caught with their hand in the cookie jar here on this. Sidney Powell, he's got her now. He hired her, withdrew his plea, and now here we are. The rest is history. I will note, Sidney Powell is also an author. And if you haven't read her book, it's her older one, not her newer one. If you haven't read her book on corruption at the Department of Justice, which directly is related to Andrew Weissman during her time with Arthur Anderson, fantastic book. Had you read it before all of this Russian collusion hoax crap got kicked off, you would know what was going on here. And when we get into those transcripts, you're going to see they knew there was nothing there from the jump. The point was to get Flynn out of the way, put the president into a perjury chap like Flynn, or get him on obstruction of justice. And Gowdy dismantles Andy McCabe. He dismantles the idea of either, really. And it's amazing because if it was Adam Schiff, Tim, and the transcripts were this powerful in your favor, these transcripts would have found their way to CNN already. But Gowdy and the rest of them, none of them really leaked this stuff, as opposed to if it was Schiff, it would have ended up in the lap of some water carrying hack at CNN or the Washington Post like David, But anyway, Trump speaking about this yesterday, if he was in the White House and they asked him about it, he said the Obama Justice Department did some very bad things. They got caught. It's a disgrace. It's treason, he said.
I heard him say that.
I agree, Tim. It's treason. What happened here is treason. It's there. What else is not? What else is treason? If this isn't, if trying to frame and remove a duly elected president of the United States is not treason, what the hell is?
Right.
What is? Right. Like an et tu brute moment? Is that the only thing that constitutes treason? No way. All right. So anyway, in May, William Barr, he assigned U.S. Attorney John H. Durham in Connecticut, who we will talk about soon, to investigate the origins of and potential wrongdoings in the Russia probe. In October, he expanded that investigation from the genesis of the probe through the election The post-election timeline through the spring of 2017 up to when Robert Mueller was appointed special counsel by then acting Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Why is that important? Did you listen to the dates that we just went over with what happened? It's important. It means he went beyond, Tim, the original Crossfire hurricane at the FBI. You know what I mean? That's what that means.
Right.
That's what that tells us.
Right.
On April 9th, Barr said in an interview with Laura Ingraham on Fox News that the evidence shows, quote, we're not just dealing with mistakes and sloppiness. And then he went on to say that it was a travesty of justice, historic proportions that was intended to sabotage the presidency. That's a big deal. A very, very big deal. So let's get in on some of these transcripts, though, because now while it's fresh in the mind of people, or, oh, wow, it's 11:10. Let's take a quick break. Keep it fresh in your mind. Let's take a quick break, have a market update, or not even a break. I go through my spiel, and then Tim gives a market update, and we'll come back, and we'll look at some of these transcripts from Andy McCabe. We have a wealth of material to go through next week, folks. I wanted to get to it. It's just there's only so much time in a 2-hour show. Acting Attorney General Sally Yates. The information with Obama. How much? I mean, now it's pretty clear. Obama, and by the way, Joe Biden stayed behind for this meeting that we're going to talk about. So Joe Biden knew. I mean, it is.
Speaking of Joe Biden, check out the DM I just sent you
on Twitter. Or
yes,
here? Okay.
On Twitter. I just want to know if you have seen that story before.
Oh, wow. We need to talk about that. That's St. Louis Obispo, too. That's a legit local story. Okay, I will, during your market update. Wow, Tim, you got a good one here. All right, during
Neil sent me that. Neil sent me that, and he might be watching right now.
All right. Well, during the market update, I'll go through and see if I can't find something on it. You know how I am. I like to. Right. I am not a mistake maker. I don't like making mistakes. I don't. Think
I had seen someone else put that on Twitter also. So,
if that's true, and I don't mean to tease everybody here, but if that's true, that's big time. Big time. All right. Let's go through the spiel. And Neil, I just saw a comment from a blur because I see all your comments, guys. That's why I say get your questions in. It's Freewheeling Friday and we'll answer them. But I saw you. I saw a thing from.
Oh, there he is. I am.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to do my little spiel. We'll go through it. And then when we come back, we'll take a look at the transcripts. While, Tim, you're doing the market update, I'll look into this and read the article from St. Louis Obispo. But, okay, guys, it is 11:12 on Freewheeling Friday, May 8th. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. If you guys don't follow me on Twitter already, you can follow along at Peoples_Pundit. I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. Follow him on Twitter at TJAnderson1. If you guys are watching on YouTube, do not forget to subscribe. We got a nice chunk yesterday. It was great. Keep it up. You know, if you haven't already, go ahead and do it. And then share it with your friends and families that you know may love the show. On Facebook Live watchers, don't forget to like the page, People's Pundit Daily. If you're either of those, and if you subscribe on YouTube and you like the page on People's Pundit Daily, it will give you a heads up before the show. This way you don't have to scramble to try to get there. I do notice now, over time, you guys are listening, and when I get in here, I already see there's already an audience. It grows as it goes on, so I can tell people are still getting that last-minute alert and jumping on. I'm trying to make sure you guys get there. Of course, we want the likes and subscribes, but it also clearly helps some of you because you're waiting before we go live, which is great. This way you don't miss anything. You could miss something in the beginning. You could miss something. All right. And then also on Periscope, don't forget to give us those hearts, even though I see a lot of you guys have migrated from Periscope to either YouTube or Facebook. I'll also grab the link for it and share it with you guys on while Tim's doing the market update. The ultimate way to support the show, of course, is to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily. You can do that by going to peoplespunditdaily.com, choose one of the digital subscriptions, or just take the short link, which is easy. ppdnews.us/subscribe. ppdnews.us/subscribe. And for those of you who have done it, we thank and love you for it. All right, I'm going to kick you guys off to Tim for a couple of minutes. I'll be back. I'll check out that story, Tim. What's going on in the markets out there?
Well, the markets are right near their highs of the day. Just slightly adding to where they were even in the first half hour of the day. The Dow is up just less than 1.5%. The S&P is up 1.25%. The Dow is 24,200 through that 24,000 level that had been resistance for most of the week. The S&P is above the 2,900 level that had been resistance for most of the week. The NASDAQ is up 1.1%, maybe a little bit more than that. I like the fact that the Dow and the S&P are outperforming just a little bit, outperforming NASDAQ since it outperformed so much earlier in the week. The NASDAQ is through the 9,000 level. If it holds that into the close, which is also the end of the week, it will probably be a headline grabber over the weekend. And the Russell 2000 is just having a strong day of outperformance, up 2.5%, a percentage point better than the larger cap averages. The Russell has been behind a little bit. Clearly, small companies struggle a lot more during economic downturns than big multinational companies that can easily just go to the bond market and raise capital quite easily. So it's also a positive sign to see the rally broadening out into the smaller companies that are included in the Russell 2000 average. So look, there's over 4 hours left in the day still, but if we can hold on to a good chunk of these gains, it will end up being a very positive feeling week after a couple weeks of moderate declines.
Yeah, and we got, again, just there's going to be more demand now that people are opening. We talked a little bit about who did lose jobs in that jobs report and why, reduced capacity. Some of those will be harder to get back. So I am, during that market update, I did check out where this came from. I mean, it's a credible source. I looked at the documents themselves, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to show it right now. And then we will get back into McCabe's testimony before the House committee that was investigating interference in the 2016 election and the FBI's conduct and the Department of Justice conduct. We'll circle back to McCabe, but Tim's got it's a good find here, and I want to share it with you guys. All right. So Tara Reade's husband in 1996 filed a brief with the court in St. Louis Obispo. Okay. I don't know how well you guys can see the actual document right there. It's her ex-husband. There is one issue that people have been pointing out with Tara Reade's story, that in the beginning she did not say he reached under her skirt and penetrated her. All right, I'm not going to get into graphic detail here. All right, that some of those details came later. I will say that he doesn't make specific note of that, but he clearly states in this brief, which was filed in 1996, that Tara Reade had told him of the incident in Joe Biden's office in 1993. It mentions sexual harassment, all right, which back then, sexual assault was not the buzzword. I want to make you, Tim, I mean, I don't know if I'm making a leap here, but the word sexual assault was not used as prevalent as sexual harassment, all right? Either way, whether she's talking about sexual harassment, and let's just give Biden the benefit of the doubt, she later exaggerated her story to make it, more politically effective. It still doesn't matter. It's still sexual harassment. And it is what it is. But this is yet another piece of evidence. In a lot of these claims in the political world, a lot of these claims of sexual harassment, we haven't seen this kind of level of corroboration or what is called and known as contemporaneous evidence. The phone call from her mother to Larry King Live back in 1993 is strong contemporaneous evidence. It corroborates her story that she told her brother, her mother, and some other people who have all come forward and confirmed that she did in fact tell them of this incident. Her mother has passed away, so she was like the only one out there that supposedly had the details of this story, but could not corroborate that she was told of them at the time because she was passed. Well, that's why that call from Larry King really was so important. It really was. So here I'm going to read this because this is documented evidence. Again, this is a declaration that was filed in March 1996 in St. Louis Obispo Superior Court by Reed's ex-husband. His name is Dronin, and it includes the passage that does reference Reed's experience as a former Senate staffer for then Senator Joe Biden in 93. I met petitioner in the spring of 1993 while working in Washington, D.C. At the early stages of our dating, petitioner, which is we're talking about Tara Reid here, felt comfortable confiding in me as we both worked for members of Congress, and we shared many other common interests. On several occasions, petitioner related a problem that she was having at work regarding sexual harassment in U.S. Senator Joe Biden's office. Petitioner told me that she eventually struck a deal with the chief of staff of the senator's office and left her position. That's problematic for what's his name, who's still around. He said he never had any knowledge of this, Tim. You know, I was sympathetic to her needs when she asked me for help and assisted her financially, and I allowed her to stay at my apartment with my roommate while she looked for work. It was obvious that this event had a very traumatic effect on petitioner and that she is still sensitive and affected by it today. This is bad, Tim. I mean, this is bad. It's just another level of
you would hope it
evidence.
You would hope it doesn't get so bad that he
gets removed.
Nomination
gets removed. I know that people who support Donald Trump, and I talked about this on American Countdown with Robert Barnes last night. The worst thing that could happen to Donald Trump is that Joe Biden is removed, because
I agree completely.
If Donald Trump is going to pull off another historical first, which he's done time and time again, it's got a big part of that will have to be that Biden beat himself, you know, and
which he's totally capable of.
He's absolutely capable of it. I'm trying to be serious here because it's a serious issue, but Biden at this point, his best bet is if they drag out this coronavirus thing so we can have some kind of weird quasi-election where nobody really campaigns. The media can tell the story they want to tell about Joe Biden and the story they want to tell about Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is most effective when he gets his message directly out to the American people. So, of course, they don't want that. They want to keep us coronavirus locked up forever, because the last thing they need is a 30,000 strong crowd, you know, screaming, Tara Reid, we believe Tara Reid. I mean, this is because look, he can't even go on MSNBC with Mika Brzezinski, who I know, all right, she was hard on him. That doesn't mean they didn't give the Biden campaign every single question that Mika was going to ask him. If you haven't read WikiLeaks, then you would maybe find this hard to believe. But I hate to tell you, MSNBC, NBC News, CNN, the lot of them give Democrats the content of the interview, often the exact questions. All right. Not only do they do that, but they'll talk with Democrats about what to ask Republicans to help them with their messaging and their narrative. So, for instance, a great example of that was when Jake Tapper and his team was going to interview Cruz and Trump. Who did they ask for what questions to pose to those candidates who were both running for president at the time? They asked the Democratic Party and the Hillary Clinton campaign. Right. I mean, so Miranda over at the DNC. And so, yeah, I mean, this is the way it goes. We call it production news. He couldn't even put that to bed in an interview with MSNBC. This is how bad this man's skills are at this, Tim. He's a terrible candidate. And here we have it again. That interview was supposed to be the interview that put this all behind them. That was it, Tim. And he can't even do that.
It just raised more questions.
All it did was raise more questions. I totally agree. It was just worse. It just ended up being worse in the end. It really did. Yeah. So there's that. I don't want to harp on the, we'll circle. Believe me, we haven't heard the last from Miss Reid, and we'll come back to it and we'll talk about it more. But before we, kick on out of here for the weekend, there's going to be a lot in these transcripts going back to what happened with Flynn. Let's get back into the Russian hoax. justice and job loss. Remember, justice and job losses in America. Getting back to these transcripts, it's going to take, even if 3 of us are on it, it's going to take a while to go through. I mean, there's a lot of interviews here. And then, of course, you want to cross-reference. What did he say about this? Same topic, same question. What do we now know with evidence? But 2 things, because I grabbed McCabe's first, jumped out at me immediately, Tim. First and foremost, the use of the FISA, the use of the dossier for the FISA warrants, okay, which we have known for years now was the main body of the FISA application. The main body in support of the FISA application was the dossier, which is bogus, by Christopher Steele. And Gowdy asked McCabe point blank, what efforts did you take to confirm this? He gives a very legalese lawyer answer. Oh, we did a number of things, this and that. By the end of it, Gowdy himself, a lawyer and prosecutor, he said, so basically, you didn't do much. You were not able to confirm anything in that dossier was true. And he said, that's correct. Now, why does that matter? Because when you fill out a FISA warrant, folks, it's like it is penalty of perjury. It is a felony to use what you know to be false information in a FISA warrant to spy on an American citizen. They already knew it wasn't true. They knew it, Tim, and yet they used it. And the importance of the context here, why Adam Schiff, who we're going to bring up in a second. Where's Shifty? Let me get Shifty's response. Can we see it? Can we see it? There we go. Flynn pled guilty to lying to the FBI about his illicit Russian contacts. There was nothing illicit about them. And in fact, I'm going to show you that in a second for 100%. His lies do not now become truths. This dismissal does not exonerate him, but it does incriminate Bill Barr in the worst politicization of the Justice Department in its history. Again, first of all, Jensen made this decision. Bill Barr just signed off on it. That's not how it goes. Jensen is not a political figure. He's a career guy. But he says in there his illicit contacts, Tim, with Russians, okay? The phone call with Ambassador Sergei Kislyak was the topic of the interview, that what was basically a railroad interview, sabotage interview that the FBI had with him. Told him he didn't need a lawyer. He wasn't the target of an investigation. This is what the transcript of the exchange says when Mr. McCabe testified. Okay? Gowdy says, the president began by saying Flynn hadn't done anything wrong in speaking with the Russians. And this is important too. The reason why I put this up is because they wanted you to believe that Donald Trump was obstructing justice when he said this, guys. All right. And in truth, all he was saying was Flynn was a good guy and that he really didn't do anything wrong. Schiff just said in his statement I just showed you, illicit contacts with the Russians. Here, Andy McCabe will show you that there was nothing illegal about what he had done. The president began by saying Flynn hadn't done anything wrong in speaking with the Russians. Are you aware of any criminal code section that would have been implicated by Flynn talking to the Russian ambassador during then the transition period? And McCabe says, other than the Logan Act, no. And we've been over this before. That's ludicrous because at this time, Flynn is not a private citizen.
Right.
Doesn't even apply to him. And go back to what Turley said. It's not serious. It is not a serious accusation, or to use the Logan Act is ludicrous anyway. So Gowdy's obviously laughing because he said the Logan Act like trying to be serious. And Gowdy knows it's a joke. And he says, I'm laughing only because we spent most of the day discussing 2 statutes that have never, ever been enforced. So the gross negligence standard and the classified email and the Logan Act. Has there been a prosecution either one of those, under either one of those? And Mr. McCabe responds, Andy McCabe, not that I'm aware of. Gowdy says, all right, so absent wanting to make a new law, you can't think of a criminal code section other than the Logan Act that could have been implicated by Flynn talking to the Russians in the transition period. All right. And then here's the rest of that exchange. I haven't done a legal analysis on any possible criminal implications of his conduct with his conversation with Ambassador Kislyak. But of course, that was not the subject of our investigation. Our investigation was trying to determine the substance of the impact of General Flynn's interactions and his relationships with Russian government officials. Again, Tim, why does this matter? He just tried to skirt away from the idea the Logan Act was ever a serious, use. There was a pretext.
Right.
And then when Gowdy gets him up against the wall, he tries to use his little lawyer legalese. Well, I haven't done a review. Well, of course he did a review, Tim. And that's why they had only some ridiculous Logan Act accusation, which was not credible and not even pertinent or relevant. Right. And then so what does he do? He gets boxed in the corner and he goes back to, but we were trying to determine whether or not he had ties with Russians. As I showed you and can go back to show you guys if you'd like, in the documents that were released that we were just discussing in the other story, the CIA and DNI files and their investigation, their digging into Flynn returned in all caps, no derogatory information or connection with Russian actors. So either Tim, he knew, well, the point is they knew that at this point they knew. So, and McCabe is telling Gowdy, well, I didn't do a review about, outside of the Logan Act, but that wasn't really the focus of our investigation. But of course, Bill Priestap said it was the focus to get him to either lie or to admit to breaking the Logan Act. The whole thing was a complete and total fraud. And yet we still have Adam Schiff tweeting out illicit Russian contacts. The hell is he talking about?
He's just using buzzwords. That's all.
And we got to stop, which is another thing I want to sneak in here on this story. Well, you know what? I don't even have to show you guys the story. I could just really basically read from it. But this wholesale smearing, Tim, of someone professionally, like Nadler does here, with no evidence, he accuses Jensen of being politicized, right? With no evidence, he accuses Barr of politicizing the Department of Justice. Before William Barr and John Durham were threatening to expose the fraud, the conspiracy to defraud the American public using this Russia collusion scam, these two were one of the most, or are the most widely respected. They earned bipartisan praise. They had impeccable reputations at the U.S. Justice Department. And now but that was before they threatened to expose the wrongdoing at the genesis of and during this probe. And now they're being smeared by Democrats and corporate media elites. And now they're going to try to do the same thing to U.S. Attorney Jensen. All right, look at the history. Let's look at the history of Bill Barr. Okay, let's go down to this. I was going to read this to you, but it really isn't necessary. I'm just going to, I'm not going to put it up. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a bullet point synopsis of these two men. All right. William Barr has been known in this town for a long time. It goes, the late 80s, early 90s. Everybody loved him. Everybody loved Bill Barr. In August 1991, under George Herbert Walker Bush, Barr took over the Justice Department as acting attorney general after Richard Thornborough resigned to campaign for the U.S. Senate. 3 days later, Barr finds himself in this mess. All right. There are 121 Cuban inmates who were awaiting deportation to Cuba, sitting in this Talladega federal prison. They seized 9 hostages, and it's a quagmire. It's all over the news. You got this young, inexperienced, what they thought to be inexperienced attorney general at the helm. And it looks like, potentially worst case scenario could bear out here, right? He makes the decision, which not everyone at the time agreed with, to use the FBI's hostage rescue team to wage an assault, to mount an assault on the prison to end the hostage crisis, instead of doing what a lot of people on the left wanted to do, which was listen to grievances, right? And this is what it was thought to be a risky move, though, Tim, because, anytime you send in an assault team during a hostage crisis, there's a threat of something going wrong, you know?
Of course.
The result was the best case scenario. The guy came out looking like a rock star. All the agents rescued every single hostage without a single loss to life. And William Barr will cite this decision as his greatest achievement ever at the Department of Justice. All right. And it earned him bipartisan praise. This is the beginning of Barr, the legend who everybody loves. Herbert Walker Bush was so impressed with his management of the hostage crisis at Talladega Federal Prison that only a few weeks later, he nominates him to be the nation's top cop. He's like, I don't really see any reason why Bill Barr should not head up this thing. All right. And the L8 at the time, because you remember his confirmation today, how politically charged it was, right? The LA Times back then called his 2-day nomination unusually placid. That's the words they use. Unusually placid, because he was supported by both Republicans. They approved his nomination unanimously. They kicked it off to the full floor, 14-0, Tim. Joe Biden was the chairman of the committee at the time. Right. Joe Biden.
Right.
He said, Barr, quote, showed a commitment to the public interest above all else.
Right. Right.
All right. You're going to be a good attorney general, Barr told him at the hearing. You're sharp. You're smart.
Biden told him.
This is Biden.
Right.
He was confirmed by a voice vote in the basically a full floor vote. It was by voice in the U.S. Senate just 36 days after Herbert Walker Bush announced his nomination. He was sworn in as Attorney General on November 26, 1991. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who was then the chairman of the House Crime and Criminal Justice Subcommittee, was not a senator yet. He was the chairman of the House Crime and Criminal Justice Subcommittee. Democrats ran both houses of Congress at this time, both chambers. They had control. They had the majority in the House. They had the majority in the Senate. He praised the hell out of Bill Barr. Mr. Barr has proven to be a capable deputy attorney general. He did a good job of helping to run the department in troubled times. This is Schumer, man. Here's Patrick Leahy. All right. He said that William Barr will be an independent voice for all Americans, not just the president. That is exactly what they're accusing him of being now. Right. Like an Eric Holder, like Trump's wingman, like Eric Holder was Obama's wingman.
Right.
And then it brings this idea like this, I'm not even going to bring up that loser's name, but I responded to him on Twitter and he basically said, yeah, you've been saying, he's a blue check lefty from Media Matters. And he comes at me and he says, you've been saying he's an institutionalist the whole time. This proves he's just a hack, he says yesterday after Flynn the case was dismissed against Michael Flynn. No, it proves he's an institutionalist. A true institutionalist protects the institution against itself as well. The credibility of the FBI and the Department of Justice as a whole will never come back. Bill Barr knows this. It will never come back unless these wrongs are righted. There will always be 50% of the country, at least, who believe that the department is corrupt and has no credibility. Regime credibility is everything for a government. Our complete social contract is built around it. Barr is the true definition of an institutionalist. He is not particularly partisan. Donald Trump was not going with William Barr to replace Jeff Sessions. After Herbert Walker Bush died, George Jr., or W, he's not a junior, paid Trump a visit at the White House. They lobbied him during the visit before the funeral in D.C.
Right.
You should pick Bill Barr. Trump, being the guy that he is, which is not the guy the media tries to paint him as, wanted to show some good faith. His father had just died. He wanted to make a gesture of goodwill. And he chose Bill Barr. Bill Barr is not a political person. This is crazy. This is nuts. Listen to what Patrick Leahy just said. He'll be an independent voice for all Americans, not just the president. I mean, you got to be kidding me, right? I mean, and before we move on to John Durham, Tim, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? This is like a complete reversal. It's Twilight Zone kind of crap, man.
Right. I mean, it's just emblematic of how everything is 100% partisan for the Democrats right now, regardless of who the nominee is for any post or
They're like incapable.
Right. Yeah.
And now Durham, they're going to smear as well. They have been smearing. I don't have to go and put up the stuff on Durham. They've been smearing him along with Barr.
Because they know what's coming.
Right. And they tried. Look, people like Adam Schiff tried their level best to hide this for as long as they could. The insurance policy, all of it. Adam Schiff was trying to keep a lot of this from the public. So the Russia collusion narrative had a great influence during the 2018 election. They were going to sweep the House back. They were going to sweep the Senate back, or at least enough of it, and then have a damning case, where squishy Republicans would start to buckle at the knees to get to that vote total they needed, paint him as a Russian traitor. Really, the obstruction of justice thing, if you go and read McCabe's, the follow-up, it's right on that page that I was just reading from. And for those who are following along, it's 146 in the McCabe transcript. Gowdy goes on, Tim, to talk about the potential obstruction of justice idea, and it's pretty clear they were using the first part of obstruction of justice, which, by the way, Mr. Mueller, or actually Andrew Weissman, who Mueller let write that report, volume 2, that's all Andrew Weissman. Right. They actually cite what McCabe is talking about in volume 2 of the Mueller report as one of the 10 instances where Donald Trump may or may not have committed obstruction of justice. One of them is the topic of the conversation in the transcript, where Gowdy gets McCabe to basically say that Trump wasn't obstructing justice, that all he said was that Flynn was a good guy and he's been through a lot. And I don't really think he meant to do anything wrong here. He didn't. Trump says he did not do anything wrong by talking to Sergei Kislyak, and that he didn't think that he meant, if there was some kind of lie, he didn't think he meant to lie to the vice president on purpose, or you guys on purpose, cut him a little bit of slack. And McCabe admits that Trump was just being sincere, like it wasn't some kind of like dastardly plot to obstruct justice, I mean, this is the whole thing, man. It's just got to make you, once you really, because it's a convoluted story, and once you really all start to piece it all together, it makes you sick to your stomach. And now John Durham, they're going to go after too. Who's John Durham? John Durham is a U.S. attorney. He is the 52nd U.S. attorney for the District of Connecticut. He has a long bipartisan history as serving as a special prosecutor who investigates potential wrongdoing committed by national security officials. So let me say that again because it's important. We call him like the deep state killer. He has a long history used by both Republicans and Democrats of going after corrupt actors in the intelligence community. That includes the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Justice itself, and the Central Intelligence Agency. All right? From 1998 to 2008, almost 10 years, he served as the special attorney for the District of Massachusetts and the head of the Justice Task Force. Then U.S. Attorney Janet Reno, a Democrat appointed by Bill Clinton, an avid supporter of Hillary Clinton, appointed Mr. Durham to review alleged criminal conduct by FBI personnel and law enforcement corruption in Boston. He led the prosecution of former FBI Supervisory Special Agent John J. Connolly Jr. and a former Massachusetts State Police Lieutenant, both of whom were corrupted by James Whitey Bulger. If this sounds familiar to you guys, it should, because guess who covered for that corruption? Robert Mueller. He let people rot in jail to cover for that corruption. So he's crossed paths with Mueller before. He knows what he's dealing with here, Tim. In 2008, Mr. Durham was appointed by then Attorney General Michael McCasey to investigate the destruction of videotapes of detainee interrogations by CIA. That's under Bush, by the way. All right. In 2009, it's Attorney General Eric Holder, a highly partisan Democrat appointed by Barack Obama, Mr. Obama's wingman, as he put in his own words, entrusted Mr. Durham to investigate the CIA's use of so-called enhanced interrogation techniques. I've talked about this before. We don't know we don't know the findings of that investigation because unlike Donald Trump, the media did not make Barack Obama release it. All right. Because that's not what the law states. It goes to the attorney general. Then the attorney general briefs special counsel investigations to the president. It's not released for the public like Nadler and the rest of them wanted done when Mueller submitted his report to William Barr. And by the way, Nadler and the rest of them all argued that the independent counsel report by Ken Starr, Tim, remember?
Yeah.
They didn't want that to be public.
Of course not.
Yeah, this is just frauds. But from 08 to 12, Mr. Durham, John Durham, also served as the acting U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. My point here, where I'm going with this, folks, is that this is a man who, for what now? That's going back 20 years, Tim. 2 decades. More than 2 decades. Everybody thought this guy was great. Right? What the hell is going on here, man? You know, it's just really what you said before. They're incapable now. What I don't like, though, is politics is a blood sport, man. It's a blood sport. But I don't like the professional smearing of people. Like professional smearing. And if Horowitz wouldn't have pulled that punch, they would have smeared him too. Right?
Right.
It's just gross, man. Argue the damn points. How could you think what do you think? Let me ask you this.
You're just not going to get away from that because they've got no other cards to play.
It really is that really
other cards to play.
Yeah.
And they know that the media
I think I agree with you on that.
will just follow along, and the media will look when you hear very similar talking points from the media, regardless of which network you're watching. That's because they get those talking points every morning, either from the DNC,
Media
from
Matters,
some high-ranking person in the Senate or the House, or from Media Matters.
Yeah.
And so they have a consistent message that they go with on hot topics that are potentially damaging, like the release of all these transcripts. And those are coming from either Media Matters, from the DNC, or from probably not the DNC now. They're just lost, or some key people in Congress.
Yeah, I just don't. At some point, Tim, I mean, they
have no other cards to play.
Yeah, I agree with you on this. I think that's really what this comes down to. They have no other cards to play. And then, the Schiff thing, he's in a solidly Democrat district. There's really nothing that because I hear a lot of people say, oh, they needs to be voted out of office. He's not going to be voted out of office. He's just not. That's not going to happen. He's in a district where the anger that they drummed up during this fraud, man, they knew they didn't have the facts on their side. So instead, they just drummed up the anger. And because rage, hatred, anger, fear clouds reason. It clouds reason. And it just also speaks to how stupid they think the American people are and how little they view them, how little they think of them, because they're just going to, like you said, they have no other cards to play. So what they're going to do is just repeat the same lies, which we know are debunked. I got like 2,000 retweets on that Donna Brazil thing yesterday because people know they're like, that's how much, she went right on Fox after all this and flatly just kept repeating the same crap. And Bill Hemmer, he's such a turd. He really is. He didn't push back hardly at all. And he said, there was nothing there with the Russia investigation. There was nothing there. And she goes, but there was. Paul Manafort, he's doing time in jail right now because of it. No, he's doing time in jail because of FARA violations that the Russia probe found that were completely irrelevant and not connected to Donald Trump. They were, however, connected to your boys, Donna, the Podesta brothers.
Right.
Who, by the way, the Mueller prosecutors It was like they interviewed people from the Podesta firm before they closed down. The Podestas were Tony Podesta ran the Podesta Group, the most powerful liberal lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. on K Street before this happened. He got away scot-free. Paul Manafort, what they drilled him about, and we had a report on this too, that was a solid Loctite. And Mueller's investigators really were asking about the work that Paul Manafort had done with Tony Podesta that was to lobby the Clinton State Department on behalf of the people Manafort was working for in Ukraine. And the idea was to get, ultimately, people who ended up with Poroshenko, give them a more favorable image in the West. They were dead corrupt, man. Stone cold corrupt, as Donald Trump says. They are. And the Kiev embassy, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, were known for being corrupt. But what Manafort was hired to do was to paint them in a better light in the Western world. And he did that with the Podestas. And the Podestas lobbied Hillary Clinton's State Department. And then later the Kerry State Department, but that was before Kerry. It was years before Paul Manafort ever worked for Donald Trump, man.
Right.
Years. And she still went on TV and lied. Bald-faced lied and smeared Flynn. You know what? I'd say this, Tim, and I'll say this again. Flynn gave 30 years, man. 30 years of his life in service to this country. What the hell is Donna Brazile given other than debate questions to Hillary Clinton? Who the hell is she?
Look,
to question somebody like Michael Flynn? A nothing. She's a nothing. She's nothing. She's never given anything to this country. She's just decades of division, Tim. That's what she's contributed. Decades of division.
She was fired from the Mike Dukakis campaign in 1988. Right. She was fired from the Mike Dukakis campaign in 1988 for planting fake stories with the media that George H.W. Bush, who was running for re-election, was having an extramarital affair.
That's exactly right. Then she spends the time in between her handing off CNN's debate questions to Hillary Clinton as basically an activist, a Democratic activist who puts this God face on, this God worshiping face on while she does dirty, disgusting things like that. Oh, and then, oh, God bless you this. Oh, and then puts on the act, man, the church going act. By the way, like I said, doing nothing in between but stoking racial division and hatred to use it as a political weapon to gain power. And by the way, she's doing that. Michael Flynn is serving the country. While nobody even knew Michael Flynn while she was pulling stunts like that, Tim. He was a hidden hero. And I think, frankly, he was stupid. I'm not trying to apologize for Flynn. I think he was stupid to talk to the FBI without counsel. He was stupid. He should not have told Mike Pence what he told Mike Pence, if that's even partly still true. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that is nothing. That is nothing compared to what goes on in that town. And for her, a woman of her low professional caliber, I mean, this is somebody, again, like Tim just said, fired for being a liar. Let's just that's the way to sum that up. Planning false stories. Donna Brazile was pushing fake news decades before it was a buzzword. Okay. And before that happened, guys, before that came out and the WikiLeaks showed that she gave debate questions to CNN, you would never, ever have thought that would ever happen. I mean, that was such a violation of trust between her and the network, between the two parties that set these events up with each other in concert with the debate, moderators. I'll tell you what, I miss Jim Lehrer, man. I miss the days of Jim Lehrer, right?
Yeah.
For those who don't know, you want to see a truly good moderated debate, look at the 1980 debate. That was a decently moderated debate. Jim Lehrer had been the standard for years. I don't think anybody would have ever gotten one of Jim Lehrer's questions. Right?
No
way. And yeah, I mean, look, that's your Fox News, folks. I mean, look at the comments. You can see the love for Donna Brazil. That's your Fox News, though. That's your new Fox News, who's willing to get on their knees like a corner, you know what, and beg for DNC money. Yeah, I'll never get invited on. I don't care, But this is they hired that fraud and that professional scam artist just so they could beg the DNC for debate money. They're disgusting too, And people wonder why I have a bone about Fox News. I know some of these girls, man. That's why. And before Fox had their problems with Roger Ailes and other people, I don't know about Bill O'Reilly. I can't tell you whether or not Bill O'Reilly was, a kind of guy. I can't tell you that, but I can tell you about some other people. And it was, one of them in particular, she's absolutely telling the truth. They go on there, and I said it, but I took it from her. They paint themselves as the Hallmark Channel of cable news, and they're so full of crap. They're like, oh, we got the same values as Middle America, and yeah, right. Place, you kidding me? I'm gonna get over it. Let's leave it. We got 5 minutes, guys. So if you want to, that's good. About whether somebody read somewhere that Trump was putting his money, some money into, or the Trump family, into One America News Network. Tim, why don't you take that one? Because you know that was they were considering that One America.
Well, there's 2 or 3 different stories. There's a story that look, the One American News Network is a network that is definitely a second or third tier in terms of viewership, and I don't even know if they have ratings, but they have become clearly for much further to the right and much more conservative based content than Fox. And there's stories that possibly the Hicks family is interested in making a major investment. And there's been stories that one other organization might also be interested in buying them. And there's also stories circulated from time to time that the Trump organization would be interested in buying them after 2024.
That's right.
So
we don't know yet.
I think that something will happen. For, let's say, Trump gets reelected. I think that they will get some big infusion of cash, possibly from the Hicks family. For those people that don't know, there's a guy named Tommy Hicks who is the vice chair of the national RNC. His family is big media operators.
Very
and I think that they probably have the money to put in $250 million to take OAN to the next level. Would then some other entity even larger than that buy them after 2024? Look, anything is possible. 2020, as much as it happened in the last 6 months, 2024 is like an eternity from here now.
I'll ask, we got 2 minutes, roughly, almost 2 minutes, about 2 minutes, 5 seconds. I'll do a real quick rapid round with a few of them. I follow Molly on Twitter. She follows me. I'll ask her to come on. That answers one. We'll see if she does. All right. Somebody said you should get Molly Hemingway on here. I'll ask her. We don't know what we're going to do with guests yet, but there are some people there's some bigger names that I have thought about asking on that I do talk to on Twitter quite a bit. And I don't talk that much about Molly. We've gone back and forth before, but I'll ask her, see what she says. Also, let's see. Would Bill Barr have let this thing go if he was the attorney general and Jeff Sessions was not? So here's the answer to this one. Absolutely not. Jeff Sessions was 2 things wrong with him. 1, he's a weenie. 2, they had him. If you read the Mueller report, there were a lot of rumors going around that they had something on Sessions or something he did wrong, or at least he was worried about some things they could have done to him. And some of it ranged from, oh my God, you did that, Jeff, to something around the way of what they did with Mike Flynn. So I don't want to get into what they were, but ultimately the Mueller report did confirm that Jeff Sessions' own counsel was saying, get out of the way, let them do what they're going to do. Worry about yourself. And he did. Jeff Sessions is a coward. He stepped aside and he let the wolves in the door. And that's it. That would never have happened with Bill Barr. And that's why you saw when Matt Whitaker, he was just there as an acting. He was there as an act, doing the best he could to juggle. Once Trump named Bill Barr, Tim, it's like the cats, when the cats are away, the mice will play. Once Trump named Bill Barr, you saw that Mueller investigation wrap up real quick, didn't you? We had a report in weeks. That was the end of that. And, they kept Rosenstein on. That was smart to do because Trump actually said that this morning. But they put Rosenstein in front of the firing squad. He deserved it. They knew he deserved it. Rosenstein knew it. And he said, you know what? I'll take the bullets from the media so I don't have to take it from whatever else I did wrong, like sign a FISA warrant I knew wasn't true, with supporting evidence that I knew was not true. So, that's the answer to that. I mean, woof, God, there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, Tuberville's going to kill him, it looks like. It looks like he's going to clobber Jeff Sessions. The other thing before we go, and we're a little bit over.
Tommy Tuberville is not just your average football coach. I mean, the guy I've heard him speak numerous times, not personally, but I've heard him on with various interviews, even well before he was going to run for Senate. And he is a very smart, very well-read guy. Used to be the coach, University of Auburn. He's got great name recognition in the state. Was very well respected as a football coach. And I just think he has gone through this whole process. And look, I haven't followed every single move. I don't want to say he's run a flawless campaign. I don't know what a flawless campaign is, but he's probably run at least 95% of a flawless campaign.
Look, he's about to be the guy, Tim, that used to run unopposed. Democrats at one point were so afraid of Jeff Sessions, didn't even bother. He would be the only guy in the ballot.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't happen often, but Jeff Sessions, Trump's supporters will never forgive him. Right. He is the reason why this happened.
And Trump has publicly supported Tommy Tuberville. Yeah.
And this morning he was rough on Sessions. I mean, you think I just said, I was mean to him. He called him a coward. Go listen to Fox and Friends this morning. Trump's statements on him. He said the guy was. This was all his fault, Tim. I mean, really, it was.
Yes.
If you can point to one person,
if you had had a legitimate attorney general,
even Chris Christie
at the time, this never would have gotten out of control.
Even Chris Christie. That would not have happened under Chris Christie, and they know that because Comey and Christie used to work together. Comey was the U.S. attorney in New York across the river, while Chris Christie was the U.S. attorney in Jersey, and they knew each other. They knew they would have never have gotten away with that. Never, no chance. And a request for Don Jr. is another one. See what I could do, guys. We thought about what we were going to do with guests, but we'll figure it out. Listen, let me go through my thing here. So, like I said, Monday, since we're not going to have the numbers on Saturday and Sunday, even though we're sponsored through Sunday with Rasmussen, we'll circle back and we'll tell you there'll be new number that day, but we'll tell you what we thought for the week and what we saw for the week. We'll circle back to that. If you guys, before you go, I see the likes on on the shows and Facebooks and stuff. Don't forget to like the show. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to like the page, People's Pundit Daily on Facebook. Before you guys go, and also, of course, the ultimate way to support the show is to subscribe. pbdnews.us/subscribe. Thank you, and we love you to those who do. We love you all, and we will see you Monday. Right? Oh, by the way, don't forget to follow Tim at TJAnderson1. And if you don't follow me on Twitter already, it's at Peoples_Pundit. We will circle back on Monday, folks. Have a great and safe weekend. We're looking forward to it. We miss you guys over the weekend. All the best. We'll see you Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.